Okay, it's Henry again, and this is not going to be a Gunpla project. This is going to be something a little bit different. I dabble a little bit in sculpture, so I sort of got bored one day and decided I wanted to do a sculpture. And since I love Dragon Ball Z, as is apparent from my username, I decided to do a Dragon Ball Z character. Obviously, Vegeta. Luckily, on the Dragon Ball Wiki, it has the heights for all of the characters listed. So, it listed Vegeta's height as 164 centimeters. So I decided I'd do a 1/6 scale figure, so I just divided that by 6, got 27.333 centimeters. And it ends up being almost a foot tall. And this is my foil armature. I made the internal skeleton with just a old coat hanger and then wrapped that up in foil to what I think is an appropriate thickness. I'm using a polymer clay, Sculpting. It's an oven baked clay. It doesn't dry out until you bake it in the oven, and you can't put it on too awfully thick, otherwise it won't bake evenly. So hence the armature. That way I can get most of it filled out with the foil, and then all I got to do is just sculpt a thin skin of clay around it. So I also have a little circular wooden display base. I'm probably going to get some just regular air dry clay and do some sort of texture. I don't know if I'll do grass or rock or concrete or whatever, but I'll do something on this to make it a little bit more interesting. And what I'll end up doing is I'll probably, after it's baked, I'll drill a couple holes in the feet and insert some pins, and then just pin him to the little display base. I think that's going to be the best way to get that to work. So, yeah, at this point, all I got to do is open up the clay and get to sculpting. Okay, so this is the first round of adding clay to the figure. I guess I've been working on this about an hour and a half maybe. Just took the foil armature and then slowly started adding clay to it. And when you do figure sculpting, you generally add a nice thin layer of clay to your armature. Then you add clay in the shapes of the muscles. You got the pecs here and the abs and the shoulder muscles and all that stuff. And what that's going to do is it's going to give the body more of a realistic look. And I'm no professional sculptor. I've dabbled in sculpture, like I said earlier, so this is certainly not professional quality, but I think it looks halfway decent so far. As you can see, I'm just going for a general kind of a powering up pose, and I'll probably have him with an angry face. And what I'm going to have to do is, my oven is not big enough to accommodate the entire figure. I measured the inside of my oven. It's about 11 inches. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to cut the head off and sculpt the head separately. And that way I can bake the body and then bake the head and then just glue them together after everything's done. So that's why the head doesn't have any clay on it yet. But yeah, this is just a rough form. And now I'm going to get back to it. And I don't have to really add very much clay anymore. Most of the muscle mass is there. Now I've just got to go in with the tools and refine everything. Okay, so after a few sessions of refining the muscle structure on Vegeta here, this is where I'm at. And this is kind of what I've dubbed the first phase of this sculpture. Basically, I just wanted to get the main body done, as well as just sort of starting on the gloves and boots. And this is already baked. This is hard and solid, so this is more or less permanent. I can still sand on it and tweak little things and do small little revisions, but this is basically oops, bumped the camera. This is basically how it's going to end up, and I'm pretty happy with it. I think the pose is pretty good. I think the muscle structure is pretty good, and I'm fairly happy with this so far. Now, it's been a while. It's been, God, probably 6 or 7 years since I've worked with Sculpey clay, and I now remember that the original white Sculpey clay is very, very soft. It's actually extremely soft, and it doesn't lend itself so well to holding sharp detail like I would need on the armor and the head and the hands. And I was watching a few videos on YouTube of people doing sculptures with Sculpey clay, and I found out that you can actually bake this stuff twice. I saw several instances of people doing like an internal structure out of Sculpey, baking it, and then going back and putting Sculpey on top of that to do the outer structure, and then baking it again. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. I've got basically his blue spandex suit and his boots and gloves done with the original Sculpey, because none of this stuff is really sharp detail. I was able to get the muscles and all that stuff done relatively easily, got it all smoothed out, and then baked this. So this is solid. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with this Super Sculpey Firm. This is a much firmer, harder clay than the original Sculpey, and it holds detail a lot better. And this is what I'm going to use to do the armor, the gloves, the head, and as well the wrinkles around the ankles and the boots. And at that point it should be done, so I'm only going to have to bake this guy twice. In fact, I've already sort of started on the head. This is seriously like 5 or 10 minutes worth of work. This is not very far along. It's got a tinfoil sphere on the inside for an armature, as well as a wire sticking out of the bottom, and I've got a hole in the neck, so when everything's said and done I can just plug that in like so, which was originally meant because my oven was only able to accommodate the height of the sculpture without the head. But also, as an added bonus, it means I can do multiple heads. I can make a normal head and a Super Saiyan head, and switch those out if I want to. I don't know if I will, but I think for this particular video I'm just going to do one head. But anyway, yeah, that's where I'm at now. Now I just got to get to work with the firm Sculpey and get everything finished off. As you can see, I figured that the clay was a little bit thick on the shoulders and on the chest, so I left him in a couple minutes over the recommended time, and he scorched a little bit on this arm, but it's really no problem. It's all just superficial. I sanded it. Even sanding it down wasn't really all that necessary, because I'm just paint over it and you won't be able to tell at all. But I actually sanded over the entire sculpture after I baked it and smoothed some things out. There's still a few little imperfections that I'll probably go back and fix with some Tamiya putty after the second baking, because I don't want to put that in the oven. And yeah, oh, one more thing, the display base I also covered with a thin layer of clay, and just sort of made it a rough ground texture, added some rocks and a few cracks in the ground, and I think I'm just gonna go with that. I think it'll look pretty good. So, on to the next part. Okay, so I've done a little bit more work on Vegeta. As you can see, I've got the armor pretty much done. I think it turned out pretty snazzy. It's relatively cleaned up. In fact, I don't know that I have anything else to do on the armor. The shoulder straps were sort of the most difficult part, just because they were so slender and had to go over the curvature of the shoulders, but I got those squared away, and doing all these little lines on the armor was a little bit tedious, but I think all in all it turned out pretty good. The face I've been working on. Zoom in on that. I'm pretty happy with the head. I excuse me, I had to go over the eyes I think 2 or 3 times before I got them right. The nose and the mouth I'm happy with. The ears I may go mess with some more. I think they might could use some more detail. The mouth I'm actually really happy with. I think the mouth turned out pretty darn good. The face shape I think is pretty good. And yeah, now I just need to do the hair. As you see right now, I have a bald Vegeta. So once I get the hair, I'll just go back and make the hands, and I'll be just about finished. One thing about using Sculpey or baking Sculpey twice, I've figured out. This is the first time that I've baked Sculpey twice like this. One thing about baking Sculpey twice, this is the first time I've tried this technique, the soft unbaked Sculpey doesn't stick very well to Sculpey that's already baked. And you know, it worked out fine for the armor because it was such a large area that I was covering. It pretty much didn't have a choice but to stay put. And I've got some holes here that I can put in some pins and do a small little bowl of aluminum foil to make the hand, so I'm not really worried about those. But little things like the wrinkles around the ankle, I tried doing those and it just wouldn't, whoops, dropped my ball of clay, it just wouldn't stick well enough to the baked Sculpey to be all that workable. So I think after I get do the second baking, I'm just going to use epoxy putty and do the wrinkles around the ankles there. Also, one thing I forgot to do the first time around when I was doing the main body was I forgot to add a little ridge around his neck where his like turtleneck thing is. So I'm going to have to go back and do that with epoxy putty as well. But those two things shouldn't be very difficult at all. Okay, so I'm going to break here and finish up this hair. Okay, I've finished the hair. And I think it turned out pretty good. I've never sculpted Super Saiyan hair before, but I knew that I had to start with this large central hair spike, so that's what I did. I just sort of made that larger spike and then put all of these smaller hair spikes around it, sort of starting from the inward and working my way out. And this is already baked. This is good to go. And I tried to make the spikes as sharp as I could while the clay was still soft, and they turned out halfway decent. And then after I baked the clay, I went and sanded them a little bit and made them a little sharper, so I think it turned out halfway decent. I didn't bother sculpting the pupils. I'm just going to put those in with paint. And overall, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. There's a little neck peg here, and it just fits right on like so. And I think it's turning out pretty good. So all I got to do now is finish up the hands, and this guy will be ready for paint. Okay, I've got the hands finished. The hands really were probably the most difficult part of this thing. It just took me a while to finally get them to look right. But got both the hands done. Did them in the Sculpey Firm, the gray Sculpey clay, and then attached them, and then just sort of did the wrinkles around the wrist and the gloves with the original Sculpey. I had a little bit of it left. I think it turned out looking halfway decent. And the wrinkles around the ankles, I just went in and did that with epoxy putty, just because the soft Sculpey clay doesn't really stick to the hard Sculpey clay very well, so I just did that with epoxy putty. and used the same Sculpting tools that I used with the Sculpting clay. So that means the sculpture portion of this project is done. Now I'm going to go over them with a coat of primer so I can see all the imperfections, and go over them with a little bit of Tamiya putty and fix anything that needs to be fixed, and then he'll be ready for painting. Alright, so I've got the whole thing primed, and I put some Tamiya putty on a few spots that needed correcting, and now I'm just going over the figure in sandpaper and sanding down any rough spots. This is God hand sanding sponges. This is 120 grit sandpaper. This is really super rough, but I kind of need it because my lower, or actually higher grit sandpapers aren't quite doing the job. So I'll be starting out with this higher grit and then moving down to a finer grit to really smooth things out. And then after I get all this stuff smoothed out, I'll do a layer of white primer and then get around to painting. Alright, I have covered the entire figure in white primer, and now I'm in the process of painting it. As you can see, I have painted half of the blue parts. I'm not using Mr. Color for this thing. Part of the whole reason that I'm even making this figure is so I can make it cheaper than the prices you pay for large-scale anime figures. And right now, I think I've got like 15 or 20 bucks into this thing. So I'm using the cheapest materials possible. So instead of using my expensive hobby paints, I'm just using acrylic paint from the craft store. I am airbrushing it. So I think I'm going to do all the blue stuff first, and then I'll probably paint the yellow on the armor second, and then mask all of that off and paint the white for the armor and the gloves and the boots. And obviously head is separate. Also, I detached the little shoulder straps on the armor. I'm just going to paint those separately anyway and glue them on once everything's done. Alright, so I've gotten most of the painting done. As you can see, the body is coming along quite nicely. I airbrushed all the blue first, and then did the yellowish gold color for the armor, and then masked all that off and did the white. The little bit of skin tone up here around the neck, I just did that by hand with a paintbrush. The bottom of the base here, that's not done yet. That's just like the base coat of brown. I'm letting that dry right now. I just did that with a paintbrush. I didn't feel like masking off like his entire body. The head is actually looking pretty darn good. I'm in the middle of detailing it now. I airbrushed the skin tone, and to be perfectly honest, it would have been a huge pain in the ass to mask all of this hairline off from the rest of the face, so I just painted the hair by hand. I mean, it's already got like the lines in it from the hair, so adding brush strokes, I sort of was conscious to keep my brush strokes going in the same direction of the hair, and honestly you can't even really see them anyway. But I just did a base coat of light yellow and then sort of dry brushed the hair with an even lighter yellow, and then dry brushed it one more time with pure white, so it came out a really nice light yellow. That's the kind of yellow I like on Super Saiyans. I don't like the hair when it's too dark of a yellow, but I think I got a shade that I'm happy with. As you can see, I've painted the mouth and went ahead and did the eyebrows when I painted the hair. Now I'm in the process of doing the eyes with the smallest paintbrush I've got, obviously. And it's just a matter of having a really steady hand and going in and dropping in this white. I don't recommend drinking coffee before doing something like this. And here I'm doing the pupils. I was about to do it with my small paintbrush, but I said, you know what, I'm just not quite confident enough to do it with that, so I'm going to do the pupils with a toothpick. And I think that's working a little bit better. Just needed that extra bump in precision. The only downside to painting with toothpicks is that they don't hold a lot of paint on them, so you gotta constantly dip back into the paint. Okay, now that I've got all the detail work done and got them top coated, my Vegeta sculpture is finally finished. And I am relatively pleased with the way it turned out, given it's the first anime sculpture I've ever done. But yeah, there's lots of things I like about it. I really like the pose, and I think the face and the likeness turned out pretty good. The colors, I think, look really, really nice. As you can see, I added a little bit of grass onto the display base there. So the colors look good, the likeness is good, the detail is good. The proportions are a little bit off, simply because I sort of gave him realistic proportions, and in the anime and the comic book, Dragon Ball characters have sort of smaller torsos and longer legs, so it's a slightly more realistic looking Vegeta, I guess you could say. But there's a few little things that I could have done better. The hands, I think, turned out pretty decent, but I think they could be better. So that's definitely something I'll practice more on my next sculpture. And the big thing that bugs me is this lean. Just due to the weight of the sculpture and the way his weight was distributed, he had this sort of lean to him that sort of got permanently fixed into place when I baked him in the oven. So there's not really anything I can do about it aside from like completely chopping him off the display base and re-sculpting his ankles or something, which I don't feel like doing. But if you look at him from the back, he looks great. If you look at him from the front, he looks great. It's only really noticeable when you look at him from the side, and I don't plan on looking at him from the side, so there you go. But yeah, this is my 1/6 scale Vegeta sculpture. I know that this is just one video, but I've actually been working on this thing for a couple of months. So this has been a long-term project for me. Not necessarily because it was all that difficult, but just finding the time to work on it between my job and social life and blah blah blah. But overall, I am happy with the way it turned out, and I'm definitely want to try and do some more of these in the future, because the whole point of this project was that large-scale, high-end Dragon Ball figures are pretty pricey, and some of them are hard to find. And I've got, I estimate, about 20 bucks into this sculpture, so it didn't cost me very much at all except for time. But now I have a sculpture that I can show off and be proud of. And it looks pretty much just as good as one of the ones you would buy from Bandai. So that about does it for this video, and with that, I'll see you guys next time.